Uh, Hi, everyone. Welcome and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Claire, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm pleased to introduce this virtual event with MONA AWAD presenting her new novel, All's Well. She'll be in conversation with Laura Zigman. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and to our new digital community during the challenging times. Thank you for joining us tonight in support of authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. Every week, we're hosting a slew of virtual events, and our schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and even browse our shelves from home. After the introduction, I will drop a link in the chat to purchase Mona's book. Your purchases and financial contributions, I'll be sharing a link to donate as well, make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever support the future of a landmark independent bookstore. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, you can go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get through as many as time allows. This event also has closed captioning available. Depending on which version of Zoom you use, you may need to enable the captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings over the past year and a half, technical issues might arise. If they do, we will do our best to resolve them quickly. Thank you for your patience and understanding. MONA AWAD is a writer who is critically acclaimed novelist who teaches fiction at Syracuse's MFA program. Her novel Bunny was a finalist for the New England Book Award and was named a Best Book of 2019 by Vogue, the New York Public Library, and Time magazine. And her novel 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl was a finalist for the Scotia Bank Giller Prize and winner of the Colorado Book Award. You may also be familiar with her work that's appeared in the New York Times magazine, Vogue, McSweeney's, and Plowshares, among others. Tonight, she'll be talking with Laura Zigman, whose novels include Separation Anxiety, Animal Husbandry, and Piece of Work. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Huffington Post, and she collaborated with Eddie Izzard on her memoir, Believe Me. When it comes to Shakespeare, everyone has a favorite play. Romeo and Juliet, Henry V, Othello, maybe you're even a fan of the sonnets. Almost no one names All's Well That Ends Well, except Miranda Fitch, the center of MONA AWAD's stunning and subversive new novel. A theater director suffering from chronic pain, Miranda is trying to produce her favorite play when things finally start to go her way, but at what cost? For the Seattle Times, Sharmila Mukherjee calls it a daring adaptation and goes on to say it's thrilling the way Awad makes the play shift, change, and blend on the page. Reading the novel is like viewing the world on hallucinogens or a high dose of painkillers. And if the intrusion of a trickster devil into a serious story sounds silly, it is. Awad's dexterity lies in combining horror with hilarity. In the Boston Globe, Clea Simon writes, in Awad's assured if chirpy tale, everything serves to strengthen the spell. And our own bookseller, Melissa, raves, MONA AWAD is a genius. I thought her novel Bunny was a masterpiece, but All's Well has cemented her status as one of my favorite current writers. She's brilliant at crafting unreliable narrators to the point where half the fun of reading her books is trying to puzzle out the story taking place underneath the narrative. And so now I am pleased to turn things over to tonight's speakers. Laura and Mona, the virtual podium is yours.
Hi, we had a nice conversation in the green room before we started. So this is really a pleasure to do this event. Thank you, Harvard Bookstore. Thank you first, Joanna Rakoff, who sort of turned this over because she couldn't make this particular date, which was such a gift because I'm a huge MONA AWAD fan. And this book, I can't even, I was gushing so much on Twitter, I was like embarrassing myself. So I'm really thrilled to finally meet you, Mona, and to congratulate you on this incredible novel.
Thank you so much, Laura. You know, I'm a huge fan of yours too. I adored Animal Husbandry so much. It's one of my favorites. So this is a real honor. And so excited about Harvard Bookstore too. It's my local bookstore, and they're so supportive. Melissa's blurb is just so generous. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, it would be really nice to be doing this in person, but I think given the fact that it looks like it's going to rain, it would be a very bad hair night for both of us. So I think it's good that we're inside. But there's so much to talk about, and there's so much to sort of be astonished by in this novel. There's the plot, the sort of the mashup of all these Shakespearean plays, whether it's All's Well That Ends Well, and Macbeth and The Tempest. There's the voice, which is just amazing, of Miranda Fitch, who is the theater professor who's insistent on putting on this really difficult, unliked, disliked play. So what would be great is if you could just read a little from the beginning. I think that would just, the opening scene is amazing, and would be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll just read from the very first scene, which is that Miranda is on the floor of her office, and she's kind of dreading going down to her rehearsal with these students who are mutinous, and she is suffering from chronic pain, and she's in a very, very bad way. I'm lying on the floor watching, against my will, a bad actress in a drug commercial tell me about her fake pain. Just because my pain is invisible, she pleads to the camera, doesn't mean it isn't real. And then she attempts a face of what I presume to be her invisible suffering. Her brow furrows as though she's about to take a difficult shit, or else have a furious but forgettable orgasm. Her mouth is a thin grimace. Her dim eyes attempt to accuse something vague in the distance, a god perhaps. Her bloodless complexion is convincing, though they probably achieve this with makeup and lighting. You can do a lot with makeup and lighting, I have learned. I lie here on my back on the roughly carpeted floor with my legs in the air at a right angle from my body. My calves rest on my office chair seat, feet dangling over the edge. One hand on my heart, the other on my diaphragm, cigarette in my mouth. Snow blows onto my face from an open window above me that I'm unable to close. Lying like this will supposedly help decompress my spine and let the muscles in my right leg unclench. Help the fist behind my knee to go slack so that when I stand up, I'll be able to straighten my leg and not hobble around like Richard III. This is a position that, according to Mark, I can supposedly go into for relief, self-care, a time out from life. I think of Mark of the dry needles, Mark of the scraping silver tools, his handsome bro face, a wall of certainty framed by a crew cut, ever nodding at my various complaints as though they are all part of a grand upward journey that we are taking together, Mark and I. I lie like this and I do not feel relief. Left hip down to the knee, still on vague fire, a fist in my mid-back that won't unclench. Right leg is concrete all the way to my foot, which, even though it's in the air, is still screaming as if crushed by some terrible weight. I picture the leg of a chair pressing onto my foot, a chair being sat on by a very fat man. The fat man is a sadist. He is smiling at me. His smile says, I shall sit here forever, here with you on the third floor of this dubious college where you are dubiously employed. Theater studies, AKA one of two sad concrete rooms in the English department. Your office, I presume? Rather shabby. Downstairs, in the sorry excuse for a theater, they're waiting for me. Where is Miss Fitch already? She should be here by now, shouldn't she? Rehearsals begin, well, now. Maybe she's sick or something. Maybe she's drunk or on drugs or something. Maybe she went insane. I picture them, my students, sitting on the stage, swinging long, pliant legs over the edge, young faces glowing with health as though they were spawned by the sun itself, waiting for my misshapen body to hobble through the double doors, quietly cursing my name as we speak, about to declare mutiny any minute now. I'll stop there.
That's great. That's so great. You know, there are so few books, I think, that when you open them and start reading, you're just completely sucked in by the voice, or as maybe it was Melissa from Harvard Bookstore who said, the unreliable narrator, which is just one of the best parts of all of your books. But this whole topic of chronic pain and writing about illness like that is was, I really felt so seen because while I don't have chronic pain, I'm one of the, millions of people who had one of those like mystery things that no one could figure out for a few years. And when you have that, you just live in this parallel universe. Like no one can see, you look normal or whatever. But what made you write about this topic?
Yeah, a couple of things. So one was my own struggle with chronic pain, which I've dealt with for a number of years. I injured my hip a long time ago, and then I had to have surgery for it, and it was an unsuccessful surgery, a very rough recovery, and I ended up injuring my back while I was in recovery because I was so unstable on my legs. So I just had all these neurological symptoms down my legs, both of them. And then just tasks that I took for granted, everyday tasks, just driving, sitting, closing a window, suddenly became so challenging, and it was very scary because I had already had a surgery and back surgery wasn't possible. So I was just going, from physiatrist to physical therapist to spine surgeon, and there was just no clear path to getting better. And it was so scary that I started, dreaming, of recovery. And I would even fantasize about, making one of these doctors feel my pain. Yeah. So I had kind of like, sometimes I had, some pretty dark wishes there. But I was also at the same time reading Shakespeare because I was a graduate student at the time and I was teaching. And the Shakespeare plays were such a godsend. They were such a solace. I can't really articulate what exactly it was about them that made me fall so deeply in love. But I think it has something to do with the fact that they have these reversals of fortune in them. You can be down at the very bottom, and then you can rise up. And All's Well That Ends Well in particular has this miraculous healing in it. So I was just really drawn to it, and I really wanted to explore it in a novel.
That's so interesting because there's so much humor in the chronic pain stuff. I mean, the scenes with Mark, the physical therapist, I think if you've ever had one of these conditions where you go to practitioners like him and are sort of told over and over that, it's a he, you said it's over here, but it's over, I love the response that Miranda, it's always that exchange of, well, is it your back or is it your hip? It's both. Because the pain moves, and then when you say the pain moves, they look at you like, oh, it moves. But there's so much humor in those scenes and in her just descent into just bleakness. First of all, I was amazed. I hate sort of saying anyone's brave for writing anything, but every time I was reading this sort of unrelenting, and I use that word in the best sense of the word, unrelenting misery of Miranda, which is you can't stop reading. I just thought it is really brave because as women writers, we're often, our choices are often questioned as far as how dark we are, or how grim we get. And it's so grim and it's so good. But the thing I love most is that it was really real. I think you touch on so many, the depth of her emotion, of her fear, of her loneliness, being ill like that and being in pain is really lonely. And that was really moving when you write those scenes about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that it is very isolating, and that's something that I really wanted to capture. There's something about pain where you can't really communicate it. You can't really share it with other people. And I think that that's what she finds when she's trying to describe it to these physical therapists, when she's trying to describe it to her colleagues, like her co-director Grace. She sounds absurd, I mean, the language sounds absurd. There's such a disconnect between the depth of what she's feeling viscerally and the words that she's using. And that is so lonely, there's this whole reality that she's experiencing that no one else can quite understand, because that's just the nature of pain, I think.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to capture that in the book.
What's also really amazing is at a certain point, and I don't think we're giving it away because it's on the flaps, but Miranda goes into a bar she frequents and ends up meeting these three. And this is where the book sort of takes a supernatural, magical turn, which is also just completely amazing, just went right with it. But the three dudes at the bar are super weird. And after an evening or so, she drinks something and like whatever spell or thing, her pain is gone. And then within a certain amount of time, she realizes she's able to give her pain to others. Yeah. And that's obviously the reversal, that's sort of reversal. But that was a great, what was that like to write? What was that like to?
Oh, it was exhilarating. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the shadow side of empathy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a forced empathy. But no, it was wonderful, because it's yeah. I mean, there's so many things that were exciting about that, and one of them was the witches themselves. I love Macbeth. And I love those witches in Macbeth. They're so strange to me, the way that they operate in the play, the way that they entice him. And I wanted these men to really entice Miranda, you know, into her own dark dreaming, which she's already having before she meets them, you know. And so that was incredibly fun. And then, yeah, I mean, the revenge fantasy, the way that she she turns from a heroine that we can sympathize with to somebody who is challenging our sympathy, somebody who is becoming monstrous, becoming a villain. And that's drawn from Shakespeare too. That's what I love about his characters, is they're both, they are always human in their monstrosity. And so it was definitely giving me permission, giving me license to go there completely with Miranda and have fun with it.
It was great. It was great to kind of follow that. And in the midst of that too is, as she's sort of turning into this monster, there are some really very moving scenes about her failed marriage. Mm-hmm. And I thought those were so well done. Those were really something.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of I think the suffering that she is having, and I think it's the kind of suffering that you can really endure when you're just you're not the self that you were, and we all go through that. Right. We all long for this former self, and I think she longs for it very keenly because, you know, she was pain free. She was you know, an actor. She was living her dream, and she had a relationship, and I really wanted to explore how pain can really compromise these like vital aspects of your life. And so yeah, that looking backward is kind of a curse, you know. She can't stop doing it, but then nobody could blame her for wanting that, because that was a time when I think she actually enjoyed being alive, and she no longer, when we first meet her, she is very, very far from that kind of life. Yeah.
The other part of that reversal that I thought was, you know, fascinating is that it comes at a cost, especially with her friendship to Grace. And so her colleague Grace, who is throughout her illness, is really helpful, and even though she doesn't really get it, she tries to get it. And then at a certain point, it's like too much, which it's sort of understandable. I mean, it is a lot, you know, she's a lot. But then when Miranda, you know, gets better, her symptoms are gone, and she's flourishing to like almost, you know, in a manic point of beyond anything. Her friendship with Grace really suffers, and you know, there's that piece in the novel, but it's also so, I think, a piece of friendships when you're up or down, and how your friends, you know, they say, you know who your friends are when you're down, but you really know who your friends are when you're doing really well. So I thought that was great. You did that really well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was something that I was really interested in. It's just that we can't really bear other people's pain, but we also can't really bear other people's joy or their, no, we can't. We just can't.
Yeah.
There's something in us that sort of, yeah, can't handle it. Or there are some friendships that it's a struggle, right? It's a struggle to watch people in pain, and it's also a struggle to watch them rise.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to explore that with the relationship between Miranda and Grace. Yeah, Grace can't really handle Miranda's pain. I mean, she's a friend, you know, she tries to be there, but she has a limit, and it's a really sharp limit.
As most people do.
Yeah, exactly. There's always a limit.
Yeah. You know, you write, I mean, Bunny was obviously set in an MFA program, and this is set in a college, a Massachusetts college. And as someone who dropped out of my MFA program after 2 days, I find it so funny. I mean, Bunny was just brilliant and everything. And but that you've spent so much time in that world.
Yes.
And why? Do you love it? Is it, what is, you have an MFA and a PhD.
Yeah. And an MA.
Oh, sorry.
You know, no, I know. It's just adding to the absurdity. I don't know. I don't know. I just and it's so funny because, you know, I dropped out of high school 3 times.
No.
Yeah, I did. I could not stay in high school.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't like school. I actually felt really stupid in school. I just didn't yeah, I really couldn't be there. I always wanted to leave. I wanted to read. I wanted to go home and smoke cigarettes and read, or go to the library and read, which is what I did. You know, but I just couldn't handle it. And it was only later that I kind of discovered it. I had to come to it on my own. I know that sounds so stupid, but I did. It was only in university a few years into my undergrad, like in my senior years in undergrad, that I started really getting excited. I think
That long. It took that
long. Yeah,
long.
I think it was a poetry class that really opened me up. It was hearing this poem, this audio of Ginsberg's Howl that my poetry professor played. And there was just something so electric about that reading. It really got me very serious about writing after I heard that. And then I got very serious about poetry. Yeah, and that was it. After that, I started, yeah, I enjoyed studying after that. I enjoyed kind of looking at things deeply. And I didn't, I think the other thing was I always felt like I couldn't analyze work. I felt it and I couldn't articulate what it was about it that I loved. But I just learned to accept that and to just read anyway, you know? Yeah.
And so did you always, I'm always interested, very nosy, in people's origin stories, like how, did you always write from the time you were young, or how did that?
Yeah, I used to write like little stories my mother worked at a deli in Montreal, and there were these paper placemats on the tables, and I would turn them over and I would write stories on those to entertain myself. And then I really got into writing these little skits. I loved writing skits, and there was something about those dialogues. There was something about the energy in a dialogue and where it could go. I could make it go in all these directions because I had these 2 people, and who knew what they were going to say next, you know? And if I was in the moment, I could just kind of go with it, you know? So that got me really excited. I think that was that might have been my first kind of foray into theater, was just writing those skits and then performing them. Yeah.
And then you did theater. I mean, I was wondering when I was reading this, obviously it's so much of it is set in theater.
Yeah.
And you had theater experience.
Yeah, I did theater in high school, and I loved it so much. Even though I was terrified of being on stage, I loved it so much. Wow. Yeah, it was so fun. Yeah, it was really fun, and I loved the writing too. I would write stuff for our plays as well. I loved comedy, and so it was really fun to return to that world and all as well, and handle the cliques and stuff. You know, the cliques and drama. Always very fun.
How did you, what was your publishing? I'm also obviously really curious because of my background in publishing, but I am always curious about how people get published, or how you started. And I mean, I know what your first book was, but can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the story of the first book, or yeah.
And then just sort of how you went through.
Yeah, sure. So, I started out actually in journalism, and I was like a food critic. Um, and then I decided to really try fiction very, very seriously. And so I tried for an MFA, and I had been working on my first book, 13 Ways, for quite a while. But I was working full time at the time, and I just didn't have the same amount of focus that I think I did end up having in the MFA. So I went in with half of it done, and then I finished it in the MFA. I used the MFA to finish it and get it ready to submit. And then I submitted it after the MFA. It's actually a boring story. I submitted it after the MFA was over. I queried it and got an agent, and then sold it. Actually, that summer. Yeah.
Wow.
But it took the collection took years to write. Years. I didn't know how to write a story. I started out as a poet. I had no idea how to do that. It was the voice of Howell. That's what got me excited about, So I was starting there. I had to learn about plot. And so it took a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like, I was thinking today about, this novel is it's so incredibly constructed and written, and it's really a feat. And I was thinking, was there ever something you wrote or a project you started or something that just didn't go well? I think people often can't imagine writers like you having a misstep or something that's just doesn't go anywhere. Have you had, please say these.
Yeah, I have like a 400-page like Gothic Mormon romance that never see the light of day. Yeah, that I worked on for so long. I did so much research.
Between what?
It was before the MFA. It was before the MA actually, because I did this master's in English, looking at fairy tales, which is where a lot of Bunny and All's Well come from. Is that very, very like deep passion that I have for fairy tales. But yeah, that novel was before that. It was kind of just after my food critic days. So in my late 20s is when I wrote that.
And did that set you back? I mean, did that feeling like it wasn't working, or what? How did you get through that? To this side of what you're doing.
Well, I was working on it for so long, but when I decided to put it aside and start working on 13 Ways, it felt good. I was like, okay, I'm actually writing what I'm supposed to write now.
That's interesting.
Yeah. so it was kind of a moment. It was so strange because all those years, all that research, all that writing and rewriting, letting it go was actually like, yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense to let this go. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that you wrote this in San Diego.
Yes.
And I read also, I kept looking at it thinking I was misreading it, but it said you wrote it in a month. Did you write this in a month?
I wrote the first draft.
First draft.
To be clear. Yeah, I wrote.
Very impressive.
Just the first draft, but I had the idea, and I had a lot of the plot in my head already. So when I went to San Diego, I knew what I knew what I was going there to work on. I felt good, and it was exactly the right moment in the book, because the those opening scenes, she's kind of like in the depths of despair and the depths of her own winter, in a literal winter in New England. And then the book moves towards spring.
Yeah.
So moving from that wintry despair to like the sunshine of California and being by the water, it was good, because it was moving with her own trajectory and her own transformation and her own strange giddiness and
so interesting
happiness. Yeah. So it turned out to be a good move. Yeah.
We're probably going to take questions at some point, but I have a few more questions.
Okay.
Which I just forgot what my next question was, but what was, maybe we'll take a question now. Are they on does anyone have a question?
think they're in that Q&A there. I see a couple.
Oh, there he goes. Sorry. Yeah. Here's one from an anonymous attendee. How did you balance the need for readers to understand the plots of Macbeth and All's Well That Ends Well with the need to keep the plot moving forward and not reiterating those plots?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was hard. That was what I was really scared of. But I wrote it so that readers coming to it wouldn't have to know All's Well That Ends Well. They wouldn't even really have to know Macbeth that well. Maybe they would need to know about the witches, but not really. and I did that very, very purposely because I wanted it to be an engagement with the plays, a deep engagement, but I wanted readers to be able to immerse themselves the way that you can when you go and see a Shakespeare play. You know, they're very accessible. And so I really, I wanted to give the reader that experience. So it was a light touch in terms of setting up in terms of setting up the plots. That you're kind of, as a reader, you're being invited to just be immersed in the world of the play.
Another question, what does your writing process look like? Do you write every day?
When I'm working on something, I really, really try to, yes. Because I do believe, and it may not be true. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this too, Laura. But there's a momentum, you know, and I'm kind of superstitious about that. Like I'm very, very worried about breaking that momentum and then losing like the spell or the thread. And so I do try to write every day, but it's not always possible. I mean, I have dropped things in the middle of working and have been so terrified that I lost the story, that I lost the voice, that I'll come back and find the thing dead, you know. And you know, and I do despair for like a while when I come back, but that's true. But then patience and it does come back. So yeah, I try for every day, but if it can't happen, I accept and go through the whole emotional process, you know, coming back to it. But yeah, that my process is I try to write every day in the morning when I'm working on a project for as many hours as I can give it.
Before the pandemic, did you work in your apartment or did you go out or?
I worked in the apartment. Yeah, I do like working like just at home. I'm so easily distracted by things, you know. I need the silence, and that's so hard for me to get into that headspace. It takes hours.
I know.
It can take me up to 5 hours really to get into that space. What about for you?
It can take years for me to get into that space. So yes, as someone, I should be more superstitious about letting years go by between writing and not writing. But when I am writing, I am supposed to be writing now, but when I am really writing, I will write every day. Or almost every day or whatever. And then there are times when it's just a lot of time goes by. And I think, you know, that's just how it is. I mean, certainly when I was working, when I'm ghostwriting or doing other things, sometimes it has to be that way. But I think it's much better to write consistently, even though I'm not a consistent person in almost anything I do. But I think there's really something to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. Another question is, what's the best piece of writing advice you've ever heard? Could you, and what's the best piece of writing advice you ever heard? And then they want you to repeat the poem, your favorite poem.
Oh, my favorite.
The poem you mentioned, which was Howl.
Oh.
I think
Howl by Ginsberg. Yes. Howl by Ginsberg. I was like, do I have to read it? I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, no, it's Howl by Ginsberg, and it's amazing. And listening to Ginsberg read it is especially incredible. And then what's the best writing advice I've ever had? This is weird, but it is advice that I kind of gave myself when I was working on Bunny, because Bunny was so different from 13 Ways. It kind of goes into the magical, it goes into the fantastic in a way that 13 Ways just did not. And so it felt very risky and scary and kind of like insane and stupid when I was working on it. So I often felt like giving up on it. I would often spin these stories that, you know, people were just, yeah, that nobody would want it, basically. And then I would ask myself this question because I couldn't stop thinking that. And it was really taking away the joy of writing it. So I would just say, okay, let's say that that is true. Nobody will want it. Do you still want to write it? Do you still want to be in this world? And the answer is yes. And so if the answer is yes, that's all you need. Like, and so I would hang on to that, and that helped me get to the end of it and have faith in it, because I took away this idea about other people, you know, and what they would make of it. I wanted to write it. So
That's such a great piece of advice. And I think one of the things that oddly, I mean, the book is so dark. Again, I say that in the most complimentary sense. But one of the things that left me so hopeful was that it's published and people are really loving. I mean, first they love Bunny and they love this, and these are very dark women and really dark stories. I mean, with electric narrators and language and all that. But it just was so gave me a lot of hope that people do want to read this, that there is a market for this, because there's such a counter market for all the other happier stuff, which is great too.
yeah.
But I love that this is, you know, people want to read this.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think there's, you know, there's truth in it, right? There's truth in it that we do have these kinds of dark feelings and thoughts that we're ashamed of. You know, they're maybe the parts of ourselves that we're not, you know, not very happy about. But I think that they're part of the truth, and you know, there's humor too, which helps, right? Definitely helps with the darkness.
So much humor.
Yeah.
More questions. I loved Miranda as a character and lived in her head while reading the book. I loved the crazy roller coaster ride. She's so magnetic and compelling, but also dark and erratic. Did you have any strategies to leave her behind when you were done writing for the day? Did she affect your mood?
Yes, she did. She was, yes, she was in my head all the time, because I actually, to get her voice, I was listening to Macbeth all the time. So Alan Cumming has this recording of this one man Macbeth that he's performed on stage. That I listened to this recording, and he just reads it so beautifully. So I would listen to it because there's a weird energy in Macbeth's soliloquies where Macbeth is, you know, it's being led down this really dark path, you know, his desire that he desperately, you know, wants to be king. But he's also trying to be rational too. He's not entirely certain that he wants to go down this dark road. So there's like two strands going on. There's like the dark desire, you know, and then there's also this rational side. So I wanted to capture both in Miranda's voice. But I mean, I was listening to Macbeth all the time. Or I was watching All's Well. So she was always with me, you know. And it took a while to sort of leave that world behind when I was finished with the book. I don't know if this happens to you, but I find that sometimes the voice of the character that I've been with for a long period sometimes creeps into the next thing, and I have to really, you know, it takes a minute to like
Shift.
Yeah, to shift. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. This question is about your time in academia, and I was thinking also too, I'll read her question, but I was thinking about whether you are more comfortable as a student or as a teacher, or what that feels like.
Definitely as a student. You can sit in the back of the class, you don't have to speak. Fantastic. You can judge everybody, you can judge the teacher, you can come up with a nickname for the teacher. It's fantastic. Being a teacher is so scary. It is, yeah. I mean, I'm scared all the time. I was never really scared as a student, unless it was like my turn to give a presentation, you know, or like if I decided I was going to participate in class. So yeah, I think being a teacher is really scary. I mean, it's very rewarding, you know. I really love like meeting with my students, connecting with my students. You know, they're incredible. And they're, you know, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to connect with people and talk about art. But on the teacher side, I just think it's a really scary position to be in. It's a position where you're supposed to know everything and you don't.
Okay.
But the truth is you don't. You absolutely do not. So.
Yeah. Her question is, you spent such a long time in academia and write so well about the kind of surreal horror of it. I'm compelled to ask, what about this environment inspires you so? And is it even possible to be a woman of color in academia and not be dragged into some of that horror?
Yeah. Well, so what is it about academia? I, I guess if I'm thinking about, especially with funny, what I was really interested in, and it's in this book too, but this book is more interested in theater, in the particular space of theater, although it deals with academia as well and the absurdities. Is I think how insular it is. You know, it's like it's so strange that way. You know, you start developing your own language. There are all these cliques, and you can lose your grip on reality in academia. You know, you really, really can, like, not have an idea of what's going on in the world, even though you're supposedly like expert and like studying and all this stuff. So I find that really fascinating. Really fascinating. It's like a weird dream space. Yeah.
Another question is, if you wrote the first draft in 1 month, how long did you spend revising?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I wrote the first draft. I finished the first draft in the winter of 2018. And then I didn't have the whole thing like ready to go until the very beginning of 2020.
Wow.
So it takes me a while to revise. I like to kind of get it down, get the story down, the characters, the voices, and then I like to go in and really layer and make it rich. And you know, and I could work on dialogue in a scene forever. I love dialogue so much. I don't know what it is. Just love it.
You do a great job. How do you work in the sense of when you finished that draft? Like, who is someone reading it while you're working between the 2018 and the early 2020? You show it to somebody, nobody, agent, editor?
Yeah, I first show it to friends. I have like 3 friends that read for me. And there's one friend in particular that a dedicated bunny to her because she was like my constant reader. But I have friends who are just so generous and thoughtful in their reading, and that really helps me get it to a place where I feel comfortable enough to share it with my agent. And then my agent helped me a lot. I don't know what I would. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do without his reading. Such a great reader. So yeah. So then usually it's about, maybe I would say, the 3rd draft. Yeah, I'll show my 2nd draft to friends, and then my agent will get the third draft.
And so had you shown it? So I'm just curious about how you managed during the pandemic. As if it's over, which it's
right.
Sort of, okay, but I'm going to talk about it like it's over. But so did you get it back from your agent during the pandemic, and then you were working on it, or were you already? You must have been already through.
No, yeah, done.
Done.
Finished the book and sold it during the pandemic.
Okay. But you had a really good pandemic.
Yeah. It was yes.
Yeah. That's great to have reader friends I have reader friends, and their whole job is just to tell me that they love it. So it's my kind of reader friends. But are you working on? Do you feel comfortable? You don't have to say what it is, but obviously you're working on something else?
Yeah. I'm almost finished 2nd draft. So. Yeah. And it's been good company, but it's, you know, it's been hard. It's been hard during, I'm sure, I don't know how it's been for you, how it's affected your writing, but it has been hard to kind of immerse myself in it. But then when I do, it's so restorative. If I can do it, it is.
I know. I feel exactly the same. Last summer, I started another novel and sold it, and thought I was in such a roll. I was like, oh, I'll be done, be done in January. I could be done now, but I want to give it some time. But there was so much distraction with the news and the election and COVID. Then we got COVID. I mean, it was just one thing after another. So it is really hard. But when when I'm really working on it, it is such a relief and
Yeah.
an escape to have something to go into that's not the news. So
Yeah.
yeah. But let's see. Someone asked what your favorite Shakespearean play is
Oh,
and why.
why? Well, I have a lot of fondness for All's Well, obviously. Helen is she's so mysterious. I hated her when I first read the play. Like, I really hated her. And then I don't know what happened. Like, she's so single-minded, and she's such a striver, and she's so determined to like get this guy who doesn't want her, and that's what she's doing all of this for. But then she also miraculously heals this king. She's so mysterious. She's a fairy tale heroine, so yeah, so I love that. And I also love her kind of like, there's an energy to her, like she desires Bertram, and she expresses that to the audience. And I love that. It's rare, she's very like comfortable expressing her desire. And that was exciting to me. That and all of her trickery was exciting to me. And then I love Macbeth. I love Macbeth because of those witches. And because of Lady Macbeth, she's such a fascinating character. And I love all the different ways you can play with the witches. Like, to what degree are they controlling things? To what degree does Macbeth have free will? It's such an interesting question. And it's a question that I really grappled with for Miranda. I was always asking myself, does she have free will? Is she choosing this? And I tried to keep it ambiguous.
It was, yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's Macbeth ambiguous too.
Yeah. There's another question. Having taken a number of literature courses, fairy tales are always a hot topic. Should we keep them in forefront of literature or put them back on the back burner because of their true meaning? How do you feel?
Well, I think they're the wonderful thing about fairy tales is that they just are constantly being adapted, being revisioned. So there's no one source text, one like, pure, there's no such thing in fairy tale. There's just a million different versions of these stories. And then they all have this eerie familiarity because, we know some version of this story. So I think that they can be very subversive and very exciting. And on the other hand, they can also reinforce, norms that are really destructive and awful. So it's interesting that they hold. That's why I love them. That's why I love them, is because they can hold both. They're capable of being weaponized against us, and they're also capable of being tools for subversion. So that's wonderful. That's exciting. That makes them mysterious. We don't understand them really, and I love that about them.
When you teach, do you teach writing and literature? Do you give them reading? What do you sometimes recommend that they read?
For fairy tales?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do a mix of older stories, collectors that they may not have been exposed to. And there's a great anthology that's edited by Maria Tatar. And it's called Classic Fairy Tales, but there aren't just classic fairy tales in it. There's a mix of contemporary and older stories. So that's a great anthology. And then Kate Bernheimer has one as well, called My Mother, She Killed Me, My Father, He Ate Me. And it's based on the juniper tree, and it's got a number of different contemporary writers working with the forum in ways that are really exciting. And then we watch a lot of films because, there's so many brilliant fairy tale films. Just like Pan's Labyrinth, for example, is so wonderful.
Do you think you'll write things other than novels at some point? Do you think about writing different
Yeah, like you mean like maybe like
plays?
yeah, I really want to write a play.
Yeah.
I really do. I love this project, especially this book, and working with the plays really made me fall in love with theater in a new way, and I love to write something for the stage. Yeah.
I wonder if it's well, whatever. I mean, we'll eventually go back to going into theaters. And
Oh,
are
God.
you a musical person?
Hmm.
I'm not. I hate musicals, but I
Yeah,
just wonder.
okay. Yeah, okay. I'm safe then. I feel my feelings about them change all the time. They sometimes seduce me, like with their joy.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I can't do it. I just can't go there. So, it's kind of like a dynamic relationship that I have with them. Yeah.
When you're writing, do you read?
Do I
you-
read?
Yeah.
If I'm really deep into the voice, then no, I can't. So I'll just listen to music and watch movies. In the case of All's Well, I listened to the plays, I watched productions. But for this new one, no, I mean, I have to just watch movies and listen to music. I can't really read, not really. I read to prepare for teaching my classes, but apart from that, no. Because yeah, it does affect the voice. I hate that. I wish I weren't like that, because I know there are other writers who can do it, and I just need to learn, I guess, how to compartmentalize better. But I can't do it.
Well, when some of your elements start showing up in my next book, then you'll know that I shouldn't have read your book, because it was very. I don't usually read when I'm writing, which, like I said, sometimes it's not a problem because I'm not writing for a really long time. But it's also been really hard to concentrate on fiction. I think in the last few years, with the news being so, sucking all the energy, brain power into anxiety, it's just been really hard to focus on fiction. So I was reading mostly nonfiction, if I read anything at all, or short, articles. So it was really a pleasure to read your book, because it was so completely consuming, and that's what you want when you're reading. You want to just get completely sucked in. Have you read anything that you love recently? Or it's always a hard question, because my mind goes blank.
I know, my mind always goes.
Yeah, you don't have to answer that. That was.
No. Well, I read Death in Her Hands by Tessa Moshfegh, and I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. The voice is very immersive, so it definitely casts a spell.
I loved Eileen. I remember when I was reading Eileen, I was like, God, this is so grim. It's just so grim. And I just loved it so much. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, there is nothing but this darkness in it. But it was so good.
Yeah, so
but
good.
I haven't read the new one.
Alive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you writing this summer? Are you almost done with the new thing? Are you
almost done? Yeah. It's hard though, now that, I don't know if you have this, but when I come to the end, it takes me a minute. I've got to rethink, got to step back, got to reflect. Can't go in. So endings are always kind of tricky for me. So so I'm at that place now.
Yeah, the ending is hard.
Yeah, the ending's
hard. I liken it to I took a whale watch once, and the boat made these two different motions, and one was searching for the whale, which made me very seasick. And then I just wanted the boat to stop. And then when the boat stopped, it made me really seasick because it was just floating and I wanted the boat to move. And that's the same with whatever phase of writing I'm in. I'm like, I either want to be starting something or I want to end it. But if I'm ending, I don't want to end because then I have to start something. I mean, I'm just miserable no matter what phase I'm in. But, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
I think we can all agree.
Yes, I think
It's a miserable
we can all agree.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Unless it's
fun moments, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just looking.
Oh yeah.
I don't think there are any other.
And Claire's back.
I think we got all the questions answered. I just wanted to make sure we got other questions answered.
Great.
Oh, there you are. There's Claire. I'm sorry about the Q&A box conveniently covering my face because I find it super distracting when I'm on one of these things. I just completely cover the thing. Okay, so I covered you by accident. Hi, Claire.
Hi. Thank you both for this wonderful conversation. Yeah, it was truly wonderful. And thank you for the conversation, but also your kind words about the bookstore. And thank you to everyone out there who was with us tonight listening. You know, you can learn more about the book and purchase it on our harvard.com, our website, or through the link in the chat. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I hope everyone has a really great night and that you all keep reading.
Thanks for having us. It was so great to talk to you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Laura. So appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Good night, everyone.